In the fall of 1931, 400 feet above Fifth Avenue, a riveter named Tomasz Nowak drank the same black coffee from the same dented thermos every single morning for 2 years straight. That's number 3 on this list. Down on the ground, an ironworker's wife packed him 1 apple a day for the better part of a year, because it was the only thing that survived the walk to the site without bruising. That's number 7. 2 more are hiding further down. 1 sold from a cart by a man who never once raised his price. 1 eaten cold, standing up, 400 feet above Fifth Avenue. This is a list of 10 meals the men who built Rockefeller Center in 1931 actually ate, the food that got riveters, steelworkers, and laborers back up on the beams every day through some of the worst years the country ever saw. Here they are, counted down from 10 to 1. 10. Cold baked beans from a tin up on the beams. There was no time to build a fire, so beans came already cooked, straight from a can that cost 9 cents. Molasses and salt pork were the whole recipe. No water, no stove, just a spoon and a tin peeled back with a key. It tasted like iron and sweetness, the metal staying cold against your lip the whole way through. Steelworkers went through this on the girders themselves in the early 30s, wind coming straight off the Hudson. It wasn't really a meal, it was permission to keep working. 9. Doughnuts from a street cart. Every morning outside the gates, a Greek immigrant named Nick set up a cart and sold donuts too for a nickel. And in 3 winters, he never once raised the price. Not even the morning after his wife died, when he showed up anyway. Flour, sugar, and lard, fried in batches and wrapped in newspaper because paper bags cost money nobody had. The smell carried a full block in the cold, grease and sugar and coal smoke all at once. Men usually bought 2 and ate 1 on the spot, saving the second for later, tucked in a coat pocket like a promise. That second donut wasn't really breakfast. It was something to look forward to at 10 in the morning, 400 feet up. 8. Pickled onions. Not every meal on this list got eaten the same day it was made. Some sat waiting for months. Wives of the men on site sliced onions in the fall, packed them into jars with vinegar and salt and sometimes a bay leaf, and left them in a dark cellar for 2 weeks before anyone touched them. A jar of vinegar ran a dime in 1931. Cheap enough that even a lean month could stretch to a few jars. By February, when nothing green was left, those onions were sharp enough to wake a man up at noon, still tasting faintly of the fall they were put up in. Nobody jarred pickled onions to eat that night. They made them for a February they hadn't gotten to yet, and that's most of the difference between poverty and despair. One of them still plans for next month. 7. An apple from a paper sack. This is the iron worker from the start of this video, and most days his whole lunch came down to 1 apple, wiped clean on his sleeve and eaten core and all when he was hungry enough. It cost 3 cents at the general store, or nothing at all if the family had a tree of their own. There was nothing done to it. No salt, no cooking, nothing added. Just sweet, then sharp, then sweet again, the skin snapping under his teeth. In a lunch made mostly of scraps, the apple was the one thing that was whole and entirely his. 6. Canned sardines. Some men wanted a meal that asked nothing of them. No fire, no ice, no plate, nothing to wait on. A tin of sardines and oil did that job for a nickel, the fish already salted and soft. Ready the second the key peeled back the lid. Steel men kept these in a coat pocket for exactly that reason, eating straight from the can with their fingers when there was nowhere to sit. It came out oily and briny and fell apart on the tongue, salty enough to cut through a cold morning. A nickel wasn't much, but some weeks it was worth defending. This was food built for men with no time or place to eat properly. 5. Cold meat pie. A meat pie eaten cold on a girder wasn't sad. It was a decision a wife made the night before, choosing to send her husband up with something she'd made with her own hands instead of whatever he could grab on the way out. Beef, potato, and onion went into a pastry crust, baked the evening before and eaten the next day however it came. Standing or sitting didn't matter. Beef scraps ran about 15 cents a pound off the butcher's discount bin, cheap enough that a woman could bake 2, 1 for supper, 1 for the lunch pail. Cold, the crust turned dry and short and the filling stayed dense and cool underneath. but it held together in one hand all the way up a steel beam, which was the whole point. 4. Rye bread with hard cheese. Some kitchens barely had to cook at all to send a man off fed. A loaf of dense, sour rye and a wedge of hard aged cheese, the cheese alone running about 12 cents in 1931, were sliced thick and eaten by hand. No spread, no plate, no fire required. German and Polish steelworking families in cities like Pittsburgh and Cleveland kept both in the icebox for weeks at a time, since neither one spoiled easily. The bread was heavy and a little sour, and the cheese bit back hard enough to notice. It cost a man nothing but the 2 minutes it took to cut it. 3. Black coffee from a dented thermos. This is Tomasz Nowak's meal, the coffee he carried up the beams every single morning for 2 years straight, never once skipping it. He'd boil the grounds the night before and pour the coffee into the thermos while it was still hot, and somehow it held that heat for hours in the cold. It came out bitter, almost burnt by noon, warming a pair of hands about as much as it woke up a body. A pound of grounds cost 30 cents and made a full week of thermoses. It was never really about the taste. It was about having one hot thing left to hold on to, 400 feet up. 2. Hard-boiled eggs. Nothing on this list was more honest than an egg. Boiled the night before and peeled cold the next morning. It took less than a minute to eat standing up, with nothing on it but a pinch of salt twisted up in a scrap of paper, if a man had any to spare. A dozen eggs ran about 30 cents through most of the 30s, and steelworkers carried 2 or 3 at a time, because eggs traveled in a pocket without breaking. The yolk came out a little chalky, plain enough that the salt did all the work. An egg doesn't need anyone to eat it with. Some meals were built for exactly one person, 400 feet up, and there's no shame in that. 1. Bologna and mustard sandwich. Bologna ran about 20 cents a pound, thin sliced and folded once over a scrape of mustard between 2 pieces of white bread, wrapped in wax paper the night before by a wife who was really packing something else into that lunch. Her husband's safety, in a way, since this was the last thing he'd taste before trusting his life to a steel beam 400 feet above Fifth Avenue. It came out soft and tangy, the mustard cutting through the fat just enough. There was nothing complicated about it, and somehow that was enough to send a man out the door and up into the air. Pick one of these, just one. Make it this week, sit at the table, not the couch, and set an actual place for yourself. Eat it slow enough to taste it. We don't talk much about why a can of beans meant more than convenience did. A meal you build with your own hands still asks you to care about tomorrow, and that's worth something a drive-thru never will be. Tell me in the comments, bologna sandwich or the pickled onions, which one your grandmother made. These meals were never about the food. They were about a person deciding they were still worth feeding.